Hello there, good afternoon to you. Confession time. I'm getting very confused about what it is I'm supposed to be doing for the environment, and then reading that BP has announced it will cut its renewable energy investments and instead focus on increasing oil and gas production. This comes on the same day that the government's own environmental advisors say that 4 in 5 of our vehicles should be electric vehicles within 15 years, and half of our homes, as in half of all Britain's homes, should be heated by heat pumps, not the kind of oil and gas boilers that we have now. So let's try and dig down into some of the confusion with a man who knows, Roger Harrabin, independent environment analyst, I should say. Roger, good afternoon to you.
Hello.
I mean, there are lots of ways to come at this, aren't there? Both the personal actions that we take and also the more overarching national government and international government actions. But can I start with the BP announcement? What are the implications of this? What does it tell us?
You know, I've had a very long-standing interest in the environment, as you know.
Yes.
But when I saw the announcement, I felt sad. Sad because BP in the past has been a leader in attempting to green its own activities. You know, even as far as 20 years ago, Lord John Browne was rebranding BP as Beyond Petroleum, and with that sunflower logo. And each time they get beaten back by different forces, and in this case they're being beaten back because a group of investors are aggressively campaigning that BP would be making more money by drilling holes in the ground than it is by erecting towers in the air. And the management has taken fright. I'm not saying that all BP's investors feel that way. Some groups of institutional investors actually want BP to continue to lead. But BP bosses obviously fear for their own seats and fear for their company price, and have not been minded to heed that advice.
And those investors pushing for the less environmentally friendly stuff, are they under pressure as well from someone, or are they the culprits, if that's the right word?
It's a group of mixed investors, and you know I feel slightly sympathetic towards them because they bought BP shares when it was British Petroleum, or they assumed it was going to be some form of British Petroleum. And it is undoubtedly true that the returns from shares in other oil majors have been far higher than those in BP. So if your pension was invested in BP, for instance, you'd be doing a damn sight better by investing it in Shell or one of the other oil majors. So I do have a bit of sympathy for them. And I think, you know, that in the long run, renewables just have to get cheaper and more affordable, and EVs have to dominate the car market, and eventually the demand for oil will be squeezed off. So it's either that or major government action, intergovernmental action, which frankly, you know, looks like a pipe dream at the moment, especially with President Trump in charge urging drill, baby, drill.
Yes, yeah. And that transition then, which is a term we often use in relation to this, the transition from oil and gas to renewables, is it possible to say how much longer it will take if we shift our priorities and change our actions?
Well, it will take as long as it takes, you know, depending on what
people
we
do. Yeah.
The UK is a leader in this, but even then, you know, the UK recently, over the past couple of days, has been very loudly backing airport expansion. And airport expansion doesn't tally with the government's attempts to cut carbon emissions. Aviation will become eventually the biggest emitter in the UK because all other sectors will have cut their emissions. And now the government's saying, oh, yeah, let's have another airport here. Let's expand another airport there in the name of economic growth and try to stimulate infrastructure growth, somewhat foolishly, I think, from my point of view.
When that was announced, when the Heathrow thing was announced, one of the things that all of the government voices that I heard on that day and that in that week, essentially, when it was spoken about a lot, they all talked about clean aviation fuel. What do we know about the likelihood of that being mainstream and when?
Okay. So it is possible to make it. It's known as SAF, Sustainable Aircraft Fuel, but it is incredibly expensive. And firms have been investing billions in trying to get it to work and bring down the cost at scale, and they just can't do it. So, for instance, the Committee on Climate Change reporting today that they advise on policy to the UK government, say they think that SAF, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel, will be only 17% of the fuel needed by planes by 2040. So where's the rest going to come from? Because we're looking for net zero emissions by 2050. And the answer is what we're going to do is we're going to ask aviation to pay for sucking carbon dioxide out of the air, or to pay for aviation to pay for burning waste or crop residues and capturing the emissions from that and bury them underground. And both of those ideas are extremely expensive. So, you're looking at potentially, the committee says that they should be paid for by the people who are flying, but that is going to make flying very expensive. And if you test the public on this, the public actually isn't against flying. It's for flying, but only to a small degree. So 70% of the UK's flights are taken by 15% of the population, and the rest of the population, I think, realises that. And citizens' juries say, if you're going to let people fly, let's all have one foreign holiday a year, and then those rich people who've got a villa in the south of France or something and go every other week, let's tax them to the highest and curb their activities a bit.
But there's more and more talk of taxing wealth, and that's an example of it, isn't it? Because clearly this government is not interested in income tax rises. I mean, its hand may be forced on that, but that's a kind of a shift in the conversation there, isn't it? And can I ask you as well on the, the ordinary decisions that we make in our own homes about, whether it's recycling, because, you and I are similar vintage, Roger. We've seen over the last, 30 years that I didn't used to recycle a single thing, and now I wouldn't dream of not recycling and separating my rubbish off, and that kind of thing. So I know that's a relatively small thing, but added together it isn't, is it, if the whole world starts to behave differently on that front? But this thing about heat pumps and electric vehicles, I mean, with the right push and the right sort of social change, these changes can happen, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, the real change that's affecting people at the moment, in a positive way, is electric vehicles, where, within the next maybe 3 to 5 years, electric vehicles will be cheaper to buy than petrol or diesel vehicles. Indeed, they are already cheaper in some circumstances, depending on fleet buyers. And so, that has given us a clean option. And for those people who think, the technology is going to get us out of this, well, it gives a very good example of how technology has got us sort of out of it. I mean, I should say there's all the emissions that go into creating the battery and all the emissions that go into creating the car itself. So it's by no means a zero carbon option. Walking is a better zero carbon option. But in terms of other things, I mean, recycling is good, but schemes are patchy throughout the country and not always very successful. A lot of stuff gets burnt and some gets put into landfill.
Yeah.
People have got the idea that this is a good thing to do, but they would be much better for the environment to stop flying, or at least to curb their flying, to eat less beef, to drive less, maybe to try to do without a car if you live in a big city.
Got rid of mine last year, Roger. Got rid of mine last year altogether because I just wasn't using it. It was just sitting there, used twice a month or something, and I just thought...
Yeah, it's not so bad if you live... I'm guessing you possibly live in London.
I do,
the transport here is so good. I cycle, I walk, I get the tube of the overground train, the underground train.
It's not true for everybody, is it? No.
It's not true for everybody.
No. And on heat pumps, there's a big question about what kind of properties they are possible in, and what kind of properties they are not easily installed in.
Yes, and I have to say this is still pretty opaque. It's hard to install. Not it's not hard to install heat pumps. It's perfectly possible to install heat pumps in all sorts of properties. The question is, how leaky are they, and therefore how big will your bill be? And those are the difficult things. I had somebody round to our house And one of them who wanted to sell me a heat pump said, yes, you can put a heat pump in here. And then another guy who was just happened to be an expert in heat pumps said, no, your house is too drafty. We live in a tall Victorian house. Too drafty and not well enough insulated. So find another way. I mean, my way in the winter is to wear a puffer jacket, and I've got this wide Japanese belt which you can put one of those heated pads you use for water bottles. I have that, and I strap that around my waist. Or you can even get electric jackets, now electrically charged jackets that keep you warm. It's better to warm the person than the place when the winter's on.
Yeah, and people, when the bills are still high, but when they were very, very high, people were using electric blankets, an over blanket rather than one you might put on a bed, just to stay warm in the evenings and things like that, weren't they? And you've led me on to something about houses full of drafts and things. The government recently announced new restrictions on rental property, or that it will come in, that you have to have a particular EPC rating in order to rent a property, and most rental properties would fail it.
Yes, they would indeed. And, the residential landlords have been pushing back very heavily on this because they say it's going to cost us too much. And, doing what would they call a deep retrofit, nerdy term, the deep retrofit is expensive and it's time consuming and it's a hassle. There's loads of things you can do yourself along the draft proofing line. But to do a full job, a proper job, to bring it up to modern standards is a big thing, and the government has been dragging its feet on it. If it wants people to get heat pumps installed, it has to offer more support than it is at the moment. And I have to say, with the current level of support, for some people, they are already a good option, and they managed to use them in Finland and Norway and Sweden. So the stuff about they can't cope with cold weather, well, that's a nonsense.
Yeah, and the things that they would have to do to make houses to make those EPC ratings better, presumably people would expect that to come with some government support, not necessarily being offered.
Well, I think some of it will. Otherwise, the landlords won't be able to let the property, and we're in the middle of a housing shortage.
Yeah, I suppose.
So something's got to be sorted out. But let's just take my house because I'm standing in it.
Yes.
We've got the window next to me is a sash window. I can access it from outside, so I put up a sheet of polystyrene kind of thing on it, so it doesn't get any drafts at all, and it's a sort of hashed up style of insulation.
Yeah.
And then the walls, I can't really insulate at all. They're just bits of messy Victorian walls, so they'd kind of have to stay. And there's some other windows, which probably need some sort of secondary glazing. But, again, there are different ways of using houses. And in the winter, when it's cold, apart from wearing all that crazy stuff, we tend to just consolidate down in the kitchen. And myself and my wife will be working in the kitchen. And typically that will be the only room we heat. And, it keeps the bills down.
Yeah. But it's the kind of choices that lots of people have been making, for sure. Thanks very much indeed, Roger. Always good to talk to you. Roger Harrabin, Independent Environment Analyst. Your calls in a moment coming through already. We'll get to those in just a sec. It's 2:16.
Tom Swarbrick from 4 p.m. Trump's Gaza AI fever dream, featuring gyrating, scantily clad bearded men amid shining skyscrapers, is what? A joke? A meme? What's its purpose? Tom Swarbrick from 4 p.m. Listen on your radio and on Global Player, LBC.
At Pets in a Pickle, we know there's already enough to think about when welcoming a new pet into your home. So, we're offering new customers 12 months pet insurance for the price of 11, with code 12 for 11. Hurry! Visit petsinapickle.co.uk now. T's and C's apply.
Got an untaxed car? You could hide it in a hedge, or sneak it in a skip, cloak it with some cones, or outfox us with a fence. You might try to cover it, smother it, bury it in sticks. But whatever you try, you will always find that cars are hard to hide, easy to tax. So don't risk it. Tax it with DVLA at gov.uk/DVLA/tax it now, or call 24/7 on 0300 123 4321.
This is the call of the chiff chaff. This is the call of the willow warbler. Hear the difference? Thankfully, some things are obvious. Like choosing Interactive Investor for your ISA and personal pension. With 30 years experience, over 430,000 customers, and a rating of excellent on Trustpilot, the choice is obvious. Search Interactive Investor. Investment values can go down as well as up. You could get back less than you invest.
What's your type? Stylish? Bold? Spacious? Choose your new Vauxhall SUV. The stylish Mocha, the spacious and bold Grandland, or the family-friendly Frontera, and save up to £1,000 on top of all existing offers. The Vauxhall SUV event is on between the 13th and the 28th of February. Visit your local Vauxhall retailer now. Orders between 13th and 28th of February 2025. Save £1,000 on the new Mocha or £500 on the new Grandland and Frontera, including VAT. Full T's and C's apply. Visit Vauxhall website.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
With Bupa Business, helping you achieve your small business goals.
I suppose what I want to talk to you about this hour is whether you share my, sense of, it's a combination of confusion and exasperation, really, about what the heck we're supposed to do on climate change and the environment and better air quality, because we know we've still got a long way to go on that as well in big cities. We have made progress. No doubt we've made progress, but I just get frustrated and confused when I read that we're being told, you mustn't have an oil-powered lawnmower, or you mustn't have a gas boiler, you need a heat pump, you need an electric vehicle. And then we hear that without any particular sanction or pressure, companies like Shell and BP and others pull back on renewables. And again, it's business, it's expensive stuff, the development of renewables and research into renewables. And I get that there are real life demands made on those companies, but they have to play the lion's share of the part, don't they, in the way that we do in smaller ways as ordinary people, just changing some of the habits in our own lives, whether it's what we buy. I mean, the kind of things I do. I mean, I don't know the degree to which this is helping, but it's what I do. Recycling stuff properly, I do that. Got rid of my car, tick, done that. If I ever get a car again, I'll hopefully be able to afford to get an EV. I also, what else do I do? I deliberately buy things without packaging now as much as I can. It's not always possible, but it is amazing the difference that makes. We have, in the building I live in, there's 4 flats, and we only have 3 wheelie bins. They are never full. They're never full. Sometimes one of them is completely empty by the end of the week. And our recycling crates aren't massively overflowing either. So between us, I think we're probably doing something right. That, we're not producing a whole load of rubbish. And that's definitely because, in my case, I can't speak for anybody else, but I've definitely changed how I shop. Never been a great meat eater. I mean, I eat meat every now and again, but I've never been a big eater of red meat. And so that box ticked as well. So in some senses, I'm doing what I can do. I use public transport almost all the time, or walk. So I certainly don't feel like I'm living a life where I'm going back in time in order to make some environmental choices that are better. But if you've got government advisors saying, don't do that, do this, don't use this, use that, we're going to really need them to be a bit more hardline with people like Shell, aren't we? Or is it even possible for them to be? 0345 6060 973. Your thoughts on all of this? It's a lot to think about. Joseph in Leicester. Hello, Joseph.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and
my
clear.
phone's not the best.
No, loud and clear, thank you.
Very good. Well, I just called in because I think I share your dismay at the BP announcement, and I'm shocked that they've even bothered to take the time out to
tell us.
Why would you do that? Because it can't be useful to them at this point in time in terms of their share price and how their shareholders feel about it. But what this seems to demonstrate to me is an underlying concern for Trump and what Trump is doing. And in some respects, I see this as pampering to the Trump politics of the situation. And that's the biggest disappointment, that we've got a British company who is taking on board the influence of this guy who most of us, in one way or another, disagree with, and that's putting it politely. Why can't they just stand up and be counted and say, look, we are going to take the march on this. We are going to take the lead in spite of Trump, because he's not going to be around forever. The planet is going to be around a lot longer than Trump. And we just need to be the pioneer, and why shouldn't they?
So you think there is a real... I mean, it was interesting to hear what Roger was saying there, that there's been pressure from investors to go down this route because it's got more, profit confidence, more certain profits added onto it as things stand at the moment anyway. Do you think that's also connected to drill, baby, drill, the timing of it all?
Well, money is always going to be part of the equation in what people decide to do and what they decide not to do. I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it? But of course, it's sad that anybody with shares in BP today is putting that as being more important than the long-term benefit of investing in our environment, investing in all the technologies that are working towards making our environment better for today and all our tomorrows, that they're being so short-sighted and greedy, quite frankly, in the way they look at this. I mean, I'm an investor, not in BP, but I have stocks and shares in companies that anybody could criticise as perhaps not making a proper commitment to the environment in one way or another. But at the same time, I do vote in a way that says, that I do care about my today, but I care about my children's tomorrows. And I think we should all be a little bit more committed and concerned about that. I mean, you're either a climate, denier or a climate agreeer, but you can't deny the evidence that stares us right in the face with all these.
The planet is really suffering. Yeah. And so we will, and some of us already are, because of climate change.
I mean, if I can just pick up on what your expert was talking about and all the effort that he's making, and presumably others, to try and insulate his home against the design and the quality of the build that was required over 100 years ago. Got to spare a thought for people on the other side of the planet who are all trying to keep cool, and they need the electricity to try and control their environment to keep cool, not keep warm.
Yeah. I saw a documentary a while back about temperatures in parts of India reaching 50 plus degrees routinely, and you could see these poor families that they were painting the roof of their house glaring white to try and deflect some of the heat off the house, and kids coming out in blisters because of the heat, literally just their skin blistering because of the heat. They weren't even in the sun, it was just the heat that was making their skin blister.
Well, I think it was last year it made headline news that it was something ridiculous, like 50 degrees centigrade in Greece or somewhere. I mean, it's just outrageous.
Have you ever experienced heat like that? Because I did once, not that long ago, actually, and I'm terrible in the heat. But I was in, what's it called? Stade de Lyon, the sports stadium in France. And trackside, it was 50 degrees. And I just thought, I can't sit here for 5-6 hours broadcasting. I'll die. I'll literally die. And I ended up getting, from the medical tent there, I got a block of ice in a bag. It was like a giant sack of potatoes, but it was ice. And we just put it under our feet for the whole of the broadcast. And we did. 3 of us sat there with our feet on it. And it was the only way we could stay alive, actually. I honestly think I would have collapsed otherwise. It was so hot.
I can't say that I have personally. I think the hottest I've ever experienced is about 38, 40, which by comparison is probably not.
But that's still really uncomfortable. Yeah.
It was. And I mean, albeit the fact that I've never experienced personally, I've got every sympathy, because I mean, I'm a fairly practical guy. I know that the water that comes out of my tap only reaches 40 or 50 degrees when I'm having a bath. So, I mean, you imagine having a bath in water that's hot, and then you imagine, the same sort of heat being applied to your whole body.
God, yeah.
And there's no way of escaping it.
Yeah,
it just begs belief.
It does.
No, I think it's just unfortunate. I see this happening with Apple, who are rolling back on their diversity, equity and inclusion policies, because I think, again, that's a sign that they're pampering to Trump and the things that Trump is saying. And they forget that, Apple is one of these companies that, dare I say it, is a little bit hippie in its conception. And I would have thought that Apple would have had more backbone than to pamper to people like Trump in changing their policies in that way, and simply say, no, we're a big company. We're successful on the backside of everything we've done so far. We don't have to listen too hard to what Trump is saying and doing. We will stand firm in what we believe to be the right thing to do. And that's really all it comes down to, having a conscience about these things.
And do you think that on the smaller personal things that you can do, you'll continue to look at ways to improve that?
Absolutely, but I would like to see a lot more determination on behalf of local councils up and down the country to make the ability of us all to recycle and deal with recycling a lot better and a lot better organised. I mean, I can see that it's happening, but I don't know exactly. I'm not sure of my facts, but I think places like Germany do a lot better in the way they organise the collection and the dealing of waste material for recycling. We should pay a lot more attention.
I think I have to say, in the place I live, the council does pretty well on that. Not just the weekly stuff, but the localised drop-off points as well for electric. And I'm not talking about the main tip. I'm just talking about localised drop-off points for smaller electrical items like toasters or kettles and things like that. So you don't have to make a big trip to the tip to get rid of them, and you certainly don't just put them in normal rubbish. And there's quite a few where I live in walking distance where you can take clothes for charity or you can take electrical goods, and it's really quite straightforward actually, which is good. That's the kind of thing you need, isn't it?
I believe so. I just would like to see what I would describe as a galvanised effort, rather than it being, a place here such as yours that is good, a place where I live being not so good, and probably other places being absolutely appalling. It needs to be a galvanised and consistent effort that makes everybody really understand that the effort that we have to make in order to control these situations and look forward to a better future and a better environment. I mean, I work for a very large parcel delivery company, mentioning no names. The CEO is absolutely clear as day committed to making the business that we work for sustainable. Yeah. I absolutely applaud that, because the business is taking risks with the money that they are making to invest in EV technology, EV HGV. In other words, big lorries on the road using electric as opposed to diesel and petrol.
So long-term thinking. Yeah, I applaud it too.
It is. Yeah. But this lady is making significant changes today and now. She's not hanging about and waiting for any kind of Trump.
She's a leader. She's a leader.
Absolutely, she is. And she gets my 100% vote for making that effort and pioneering the approach. And that's what we need, leaders to do that.
We do. We need them in our community level, and we need them at national, international level as well. Thanks, Joseph, for your call. Joseph in Leicester. Text here from Neil says it's only a few years, and it's a really good point. It's only a few years since we were told the main reason we couldn't properly tax these energy companies is because they were investing so much money into renewable energy. Does this mean we can finally put a proper windfall tax on them if they're going to go back to fossil fuels? Excellent question, Neil. I will ask it as soon as I get the first opportunity to do so. Really good question. It's 2:30.